Hello and welcome to this webinar on working with annotations in D3PLOT and D3PLOT Viewer. My name is Jack Cross, and today I'm going to show you how you can use annotations to support you in reviewing analysis results and sharing them with your colleagues. Annotations is a really useful tool that can help you at different stages of your analysis workflow. When you're setting up and debugging an analysis, annotations provide a convenient way to make notes on the results. For example, if you are checking an analysis, you can save an annotation to record areas of the model you'll need to fix and come back to those annotations later when you are updating the model. When you want to review an analysis with colleagues from your team, you can create a set of annotations covering the key points you want to discuss. Then load those annotations and step through different views of the model with your notes displayed alongside. You could also share your annotations file with colleagues so they can step through the annotations in D3PLOT themselves. If you're sharing results with a client who doesn't have access to D3PLOT, you can export your annotations to D3PLOT Viewer, the Oasys LS-DYNA web viewer. You can then share the annotations with them by sending a file or by sharing a link, and they will be able to view your annotations alongside the 3D results in a web browser without needing to install any software, and with all the data remaining local to their machine. We will revisit these use cases as we look at how to use annotations in D3PLOT and D3PLOT Viewer in the rest of this webinar. In this webinar, I'll explain how to create and edit annotations in D3PLOT, and also how to save and retrieve annotations from file. I'll then show how you can present annotations in D3PLOT, for example when presenting your findings to colleagues at an internal review. We'll then move on to exporting annotations from D3PLOT to D3PLOT Viewer, and finally look at how to look at annotations in the D3PLOT Viewer itself. So let's look at how we would go about creating some annotations. Here I've opened a demonstration analysis of a suspension load case, which I've begun to post-process. The model includes the rear part of a vehicle with loads applied to the rear suspension tower. I know this analysis contains some problems, and I'm going to use annotations to help me keep track of those as I investigate the results. To open the Annotations panel, click on the Annotations button in the Tools menu. I'll talk through the panel as I show you how to create an annotation. At the top, you can see two tabs. The Edit tab that we're currently in, where I can create and modify annotations. And next to it, the Playback tab, that I'll show you later, where I can present annotations. Also, at the top of the panel is a switch to turn the markers for annotations on and off. As you can see, markers for the two annotations I have already created are shown on the model in these circular labels. The currently selected annotation is highlighted in yellow with an orange border, while the other annotations are shown in white with a grey border. I can turn the annotation markers off by clicking the button. Below the tabs are the Save and Retrieve buttons that are used to save annotations to a file and retrieve annotations from a file, so I can work on them in different sessions. I'll show you more details about this later in the webinar. We now come to the part of the panel that is for creating annotations. The process for creating an annotation would start with setting up the view that you want. I'm concerned about the load magnitude in this model, so I'll check plastic strain around the suspension tower. I set up the view using all the normal D3PLOT menus and select the state that I'm interested in, which is where first yielding takes place. Now I'm happy with the view, I'm ready to create the new annotation. I return to the Annotations panel. Here, I need to ensure that I've selected the new annotation row in the list of annotations. Then I click the Select Markers button. This brings up an object menu that allows me to choose an entity to attach a marker to for this annotation. I'll select the part where the yielding is occurring and click Apply. As you can see, the annotation marker is now drawn at the center of the part. It's not necessary to select a marker. You can create an annotation without one. The text box below the Select Markers button is for the annotation title. As I'm just creating these annotations for my own record, I'll just make the title a reminder to myself to check the load magnitude. Below the title text box is a larger text box for entering a longer description. Here, I'll add that I should consider reducing the load magnitude to a more reasonable value so that yielding in the suspension tower is avoided this early in the analysis. As you can see, the description text box wraps the text. If your description exceeds the height of the text box, you'll be able to navigate up and down using the arrow keys. We will be introducing improvements to the usability of the description text box in version 21. I've now completed all of the annotation information, and I'm ready to capture the annotation by clicking the Capture button below the description text box. When I click Capture, D3PLOT is saving settings and properties files alongside the annotation information so that the view can be reloaded. Next to the Capture button is the Reload button that I click to reload an annotation. Below the Capture and Reload buttons is a list of the annotations along with a row for creating a new annotation. If I click on one of the annotations that I have previously created and click Reload, the annotation title and description text boxes are updated, and the annotation view is reloaded, as you can see. The annotations are listed with a number, their title, and then on the right-hand side, 2 tick boxes. The first tick box is an autoplay on reload option. When unticked, the view will be reloaded as a static state. But if you tick this box, when the annotation is reloaded, it will be animated, as you can see if I reload annotation 2. By default, autoplay is unselected. Next to the autoplay on reload tick box is a second tick box to specify whether the annotation should be exported to D3PLOT Viewer as a single frame or as an animation. I'll come on to D3PLOT Viewer later in the webinar. By default, export as animation is selected. I've now completed my investigation of this model, and I created one additional annotation, so now I have a list of 4 annotations in total. I'll save these annotations to a file by clicking the Save to File button, entering a file name, and pressing Enter. Below the annotations list, there are some more buttons for managing the annotations in the list. When I click on the Reorder button, D3PLOT opens a panel that allows me to move annotations up and down the list to reorder it. The buttons on the left jump the selected annotation to the top or bottom of the list, while the buttons on the right move the selected annotation up one place or down one place in the list. When I'm happy with the order, I can click Dismiss to return to the Annotations panel. I can also delete the currently selected annotation by clicking the Delete button, like this. Remember, when you press Delete, there's no confirmation, so the annotation is immediately deleted. I can delete all of the annotations in the list at once by clicking Delete All, like this. In this case, I do get a confirmation box before the annotations are deleted. Finally, annotations can be exported to the D3PLOT viewer. I'll show you how to do this later in the webinar, but there is a button at the bottom of the panel for easy access to the D3PLOT viewer tab in the Images panel. In this example, I would go away and update the model to fix the problems that I found here. And once that model had run, I would want to check the fixes had been successful. I can use annotations to help me with this process. What I'm going to do is to open the annotations file I just saved, but instead of opening it with the model that I've just been showing you, I'll open it with the next iteration of the model that contains my fixes. Firstly, I click the Retrieve from File button and select the annotations file I just saved. A menu is shown, allowing me to select what model I want to open the annotations with. The model box is pre-populated with the path to the model that was used to create the annotations, so I could just click Apply and use this model. But I also have the option to either select from the models open in the current session using the drop-down, or to browse for a different model by clicking the File selector. I'll do that and select the next iteration of this model with the fixes, and then click Apply. At this stage, D3PLOT hasn't opened the new model, and it still has the old model in the session. It's only when I reload an annotation that D3PLOT has to open the model that is associated with the annotation. So when I hit reload for the first time, you'll see D3PLOT go through the process of opening the new model and then updating the page to give the correct view. I can then look at each of the issues I identified in the previous analysis and check that they've been fixed. Here, for example, we can see that the contact definition that was previously allowing parts to penetrate through one another is now behaving correctly, and we could follow the same process to check each of the other annotations in turn. That's covered creating and editing annotations. What we're going to look at next is how to present annotations within D3PLOT. Here's another set of annotations that I've created, ready to discuss with my colleagues. I'll be presenting these in D3PLOT, but before I do, I'll check that I'm happy with them and show you how you can edit and modify annotations once you've created them. The first annotation is an overview of the model. I can see that there is a typo in the title. To correct it, I simply edit the title in the text box, and as soon as I press enter or click outside the text box, the title will be updated. It's not necessary to click Update View when editing annotation text or changing the marker. To check the fourth annotation, I must select it in the list. I can then check the text in the title and the description, but to ensure the view is correct, I must click Reload View. In the Edit tab, the view is not auto-reloaded when I select an annotation in the list. In this annotation, the marker location is obscuring the peak values of the contour plot. I'll click the Select Markers button to reselect the marker entity and select an element that's offset from this peak region. Finally, I'll reload the last annotation. In this case, we've got a view of the whole vehicle, but the annotation refers only to the front windshield. I'll zoom in a bit further to capture the more detail of the area of interest. In this case, I have modified the view, so I do need to click Update View for this change to be applied to the annotation, as D3PLOT needs to write new settings and properties files. Now I'm happy with these annotations, I can share them with my colleagues, and for that, I would use the Playback tab. This presents a different, more simplified view of the annotations. I have forwards and backwards navigation buttons, so I can step through the annotations list. And I have a drop-down list of the annotations, so I can jump to a specific annotation. I also have the title text box and the description text boxes, which cannot be edited in this tab. The description text box is much taller than in the Edit tab, so you can see more of your text without scrolling. When I change to a new annotation, either by stepping forwards or selecting from the drop-down list, the annotation is automatically reloaded. I could also share the annotation file with my colleagues, and they could view the annotations in D3PLOT independently. They would be able to read my comments in the descriptions and perhaps respond. One thing to note about the annotations file is that it contains the annotations data, so for example marker locations, titles and descriptions. It also contains the settings and properties files for each annotation, and paths for the models that were used to create the annotations. The results data is not saved in the file, so the size of the annotations file should remain reasonable. However, it does mean that if anyone else is going to be able to open the annotations file and look at the annotations, they will need to have access to the models themselves. If I want to share annotations with someone who doesn't have D3PLOT, then I can make use of the D3PLOT viewer, our free web viewer designed specifically for displaying analysis results exported from D3PLOT. To export a set of annotations, I open them in D3PLOT, as we've previously looked at. Then, in the Annotations panel, I click the Export button at the bottom of the panel. This opens the Images panel in the D3PLOT Viewer tab. You could, of course, also open the panel via the menus at the top of the window images and then D3PLOT viewer. I can export the current page, a single window or a set of annotations to the viewer by using the radio buttons. I select the file to save the D3PLOT viewer export to using the file selector. I can select to write either an uncompressed or a compressed file. The compression reduces the file size by a significant factor, so it is recommended and is set as the default. For annotations, the state selection is defined in each annotation, so it's not necessary to modify this. However, when you're exporting a single window or a single page, it offers you a shortcut to changing the state selection if you want to. There's then a tick box to anonymize the part tree. Normally, when we export a model to D3PLOT viewer, part names are exported. However, if you tick this box, the parts will be exported just with numbers and with no text. This means you can share results without releasing any information that may be included in the part names. Now that everything's set up, to export the file, we simply click Capture at the top of the panel. The export process takes some time, depending on the size of the model, the number of annotations, and so on. Export supports solids, shells, thick shells, and beam elements only, and does not support some features, such as cut sections. These features are automatically switched off during the export, although you will get a warning message popping up and need to accept that. The 3D export files are limited in size. This means it's worth thinking about the annotations you're creating and taking steps to reduce the file size if you can. The best ways to do this are to export single frames rather than animations if you can, to export shaded images rather than contour plots if you can, and also to blank out parts which are not relevant to the particular part of the model that you're looking at for an annotation, as again this saves a lot of space. Once the file has been written, we are then ready to check it in D3PLOT viewer. D3PLOT viewer is accessed from wherever you are at d3plotViewer.com. I will open the file I just created by dragging and dropping. D3PLOT viewer is free to use for you, your partners, and your clients. It requires no installation, no registration, and no setup. It runs in your browser, and you can just load models in and start exploring. When you open a model in the D3PLOT viewer, all of your model data stays in your browser. It doesn't get uploaded anywhere. There is also an HTML bundle if you need to work offline. D3PLOT viewer is integrated with SharePoint and OneDrive, and you can find out more about this in our past webinars on our website. D3PLOT viewer has a simple interface that you can probably learn quickly by just exploring, but I'll give you a quick overview. Most controls are via the icons in the top left of the window. The first icon is for navigation, allowing you to set the mouse function and to access standard views. Shortcut keys are indicated on the right-hand side of the menu. Clicking the standard views changes the view in the window immediately, as you can see. Clicking the navigation modes at the top of the menu changes the function of the mouse. For example, changing to pan mode and then back to multi-nav mode, which works in a similar way to D3PLOT. The blanking mode allows you to click on the model to blank parts by clicking with the left mouse button. The middle mouse button undoes the last action, similar to D3PLOT. In the menu, you can reverse the blanking and also unblank all. The cut section icon allows you to define a cut section, which we'll come back to later. Then we have the part tree, where includes and parts can be inspected, blanked and unblanked, as you can see. Finally, we have the annotations icon, which will only be visible if you have loaded a file with annotations in it. The annotations mode is similar to the playback mode in D3PLOT. You see the annotation title and the annotation description, and then you can navigate forwards and backwards using the arrow buttons, or you can jump to a particular annotation using the list of annotations. The switch at the bottom of the menu turns the markers on and off. The D3PLOT viewer also enables you to step between annotations by clicking on the markers like this. If we look at annotation 3, which had a cut section in D3PLOT, you can see that in the viewer the cut section is not present. However, we can recreate this using the Viewer Cut Section tool. First, I'll rotate the model so we can see what we're doing. We want a cut plane normal to the Y global axis, and we need to reflect the cut to get the correct side of the vehicle showing. If I zoom out, you can see the cut plane drag handles that allow you to easily shift and rotate the cut plane as required. This annotation is also animated and has an animation bar at the bottom of the window. Animation is controlled using the buttons at the bottom left of the window, so I can play, fast forward, fast back, and stop. Annotations in D3PLOT and D3PLOT Viewer offers a powerful addition to your workflow, helping you to post-process analyses, present results to colleagues in D3PLOT, and share results with clients and collaborators via D3PLOT Viewer. We're keen to get feedback on this feature and are also planning improvements in future releases. In D3PLOT, we're making improvements to the usability of the annotation panel with an improved playback view, with adjustable font size for better screen sharing. We'll add thumbnails to the annotations list to make for easier navigation. And finally, we're also going to introduce an even quicker and easier way to capture views called bookmarks. Thank you for listening, and I hope you find the annotations feature in D3PLOT and D3PLOT Viewer useful.